And welcome back to our next edition of the CVB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined today by Matt Majinski and Ben Anderson, and we will be simulating a bracket with each of the 2023 to 2024 all-conference college basketball teams. Well, I guess not each of them. We will be taking 10 conferences. We will be doing a single elimination bracket, so we'll have the Big Six, and then we'll have play-in games for the AAC and the A10, and then we'll have the Mountain West and the WCC as a play-in. We're just going to be imagining that these all-conference teams are playing a 5v5 against each other, and the coach of the years will be the ones coaching the teams for their respective conferences. For the conferences with more than 5 players in their all-conference team, I just took the 5 with the most votes, but just imagine they have unlimited stamina and like unlimited fouls. Just we're looking at how they function on the court. Now we have 3 of us in this episode, so majority will rule if we disagree on the games. All right. With that being said, let's take a look at this bracket that we randomized before the show. So we've got a little interesting bracket here. We'll start with the playing games though, so let's get rolling. Starting with the Mountain West against the West Coast Conference. Ben, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I looked at these teams, and the question with all conference teams is always whether you care if they can actually play together on a court as a 5-man roster. In this case, that's what we're looking for. And what concerns me most with the West Coast Conference is that they don't really have shooters. A lot of the bigs were very, very strong in that conference this year in the WCC. But really, you would love to see Jonathan Mugbo be able to shoot. He took 2 3-pointers all year and missed them both. So because of the spacing issues and the talent of the Mountain West guards, I just think I would lean towards the MWC in this situation.
Matt, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I took the West Coast only based off of, you're going to see as this bracket goes on, based off of what these teams, specific teams within the conferences did when it mattered most in the NCAA tournament. I figured, hey, this is a bracket. Let's do it that way. And I just felt like the Mountain West didn't really play well against the top competition, and we consider the West Coast Conference some top competition. I do like the way Marcio Alonis might be able to run this team. Graham Ike kind of impressed me this season. I mean, I think overall maybe, I think it would be a really close game, but I just kind of lean towards the West Coast for that reason.
I'm going to break the tie here. I'm going Mountain West. I mean, I understand the fact that the West Coast Conference was a top-heavy conference, so this exercise is taking the top 5 players in each conference, presumably. That favors the West Coast, but I'm using Ben's logic that, like, let's say we're simulating a game here. Who's running the 2 for the West Coast Conference? Is it Mogbo? Like, that's just not feasible in real life. Plus, I think Mountain West just has so much talent in their backcourt. Isaiah Stevens is going to go off, I feel like, in this matchup with who's going to be defending him. I don't know. So I'm going Mountain West. Let's move on to our second playing game. We got the Atlantic 10 against the American. Honestly, I'm looking at these teams. I really like the A10 just from a first team all conference talent perspective. I think they could do some really good things. First off, you got Deron Holmes. He's dominant, and their backcourt is pretty damn good too. We got Reynolds, who's extremely underrated. Jordan King transferring up. I mean, it's the only thing holding them back is probably Chris Mooney. I don't know if he's necessarily been the best at maximizing his talent, but also look at the American. That is all guards. All 5 of those are pretty much guards. So who's guarding Deron Holmes? Matt, if you want to take this one next.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of set me up there on a T right there. I mean, Deron Holmes is easily the X factor here. I don't know who in the American would be able to match up with him. Few people across the country can. So that's really a game in, game out type of statement there. And I think for me, the top player for the American is clearly, at least scoring wise, John L. Davis. But you look at what Eric Reynolds can do. You look at how Max Shulga can shoot the ball. I just feel like the Atlantic 10 has those guys to offset. Maybe if John L. Davis were to go off for like 30 points or something. And so I like the Atlantic 10.
Yeah, this is already settled because it's both of y'all picked the Atlantic 10, but I'm going to agree with it and make it a unanimous vote here. I think the A10 has the best roster fit or one of the best ones that we'll see throughout these all-conference teams. And they do struggle a little bit with size, especially at the 4. Matt Cross isn't the biggest dude in the world, but he would likely be playing that position. But against the American, it's not as much of a concern because, like you said, totally really guard heavy for the AAC here. So give me the A10 to move on to the quarterfinals.
All right, so play-ins are done. Let's move on to the next round. And we got the Big Ten against the Big East. This is an interesting one. I'll start with Matt for this one.
I mean, to me, this is as simple as it can be. The national champion is Connecticut. Tristan Newton, Cam Spencer, Dan Hurley, all within this first team and the coach for the team. So it doesn't get much better than that. Devin Carter, a projected top pick in the NBA draft. Tyler Kolek, the way that he can really run the point. I mean, Baylor Shireman, obviously, you look at Shireman and Carter would be one of them is going to have to play the 5. So it's like, who's matching up with Zach Edey? But we've seen small teams beat Zach Edey before. Obviously, not necessarily this year. He really went on a run, but we're talking a small team with the top players in a conference, in the Big East Conference, going up against them. So while Zach Edey could probably score 45 or 50 points against these guys, I just think that you got so much NBA talent, winners on this Big East team. To me, it's the Big East. And then you look at the Big Ten, and you've got guys like Braden Smith and, Marcus Domask, great players, but I'm just not sure if they match up with that level of the Big East.
Yeah, I think in general, these games are going to all be extremely high scoring, or at least very much for the most part. I'm taking the Big Ten. I think if you surround Zach Edey with all this talent, all this playmaking and ability to score off the dribble, guys like Domask, guys like Shannon, I don't see how you're stopping it. That's really the difference to me, because the Big East is going to miss a few shots, and the Big Ten has their safety net of Zach Edey, and like a final score like 98-90, but I think that favors the Big Ten here.
Yeah, and to break the tie here, I'm going to lean with Dan. The Big Ten isn't necessarily known as a conference for scoring, but this team is just so talented. 4 of these 5 players, with the exception of Braden Smith, can put up 30 on any given night. And while we did see, like you mentioned, UConn, just destroy Illinois, that Illinois team also didn't have Zach Edey, right? That UConn had to worry about as well. So I think that it's just a tough matchup perspective for the Big East, and the randomization of our bracket didn't really do either of these teams any favors, because I think this is a championship-worthy matchup. But for the reasons that Dan stated, I think I'm going to have to go with the Big Ten. It just feels like they have a little bit too much offensive firepower.
Next game, we've got the Big 12 against the winner of the play-in, that being the Mountain West. We'll throw it back to Ben for this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the question here is, look, the Big 12 has 2 of the best defensive guards in the country in Tamin Lipsey and Jamal Shead. And are they able to shut down Isaiah Stevens and whoever that second person is on, probably Darius Brown? And I think for them, the answer is yes. I will be really intrigued by the Hunter Dickinson, Jalen Ledee matchup. Dickinson tend to have gotten foul trouble throughout the season, but I just think that this Big 12 team is slightly too talented for the Mountain West to hang with, especially from a defensive perspective. We talked about offense for the first 3 matchups here. I think this is actually going to be more of a who plays better defense wins this game. I do worry a little bit about the Big 12 shooting, but I see no reason to not pick one of the best conferences in the country in this matchup.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't even pick the Mountain West to win their first game, so I'm clearly not going to pick them against the Big 12. It's just a power conference. I mean, you're talking about Hunter Dickinson, a healthy Kevin McCullough, if that's the case, Jamal Shead. I mean, you're talking about Player of the Year, All-American candidates. They seem like they'd fit well together because you only have one true big man in Hunter Dickinson, at least the way I kind of view the way the spacing could go. And then you got a point guard in Jamal Shead. I mean, I know the Mountain West has that too, but it just seems like this Big 12 team I think they could beat this Mountain West team by 12, 15 points.
Yeah, just individual matchups, player versus player. Big 12 wins, nothing much to add there. So I'll send it to the next matchup, which will be the SEC against the Pac-12. And Matt, I'll let you take this one first.
I'm going with Dalton Knecht here. I mean, you look at him and you just see what he's able to do. And I know that the Pac-12 has Caleb Love. You can never count him out of a game. Keon Brooks, a guy that I do like, even though Washington wasn't that great this season. But you talk about Dalton Connect, you talk about Mark Sears, Wade Taylor. Like when you look at this SEC team, especially with Lamont Paris head coach, they could realistically drop 110, 120 points on the Pac-12 in a game in 40 minutes, like maybe even more. I mean, I'll be honest, like these are 5 of the top 15 scorers in the country when it comes down to it. Maybe take out Johnny Broome out of that equation, but even he can get it done. He can score the ball. He can rebound the ball, keep the plays alive. A bit undersized, maybe. I mean, like, I'm sure Ballo could take advantage of Broome down low, but when it comes down to it, I think they've got enough dogs to really put this game away.
Yeah, this game is about pace to me. If it's a very fast-paced run-and-gun game, the SEC is going to win. But I think the Pac-12 maybe with Kyle Smith, a very good schematic coach, not that Lamont Paris isn't, but I think the Pac-12 could kind of get into their half-court offense, and I don't see how they're going to be stopped in that respect. Oumar Ballo, like no one's going to be able to guard him. That's an actual traditional front court that the Pac-12 brings, and the SEC kind of has that same syndrome of the AAC in that they're all just guards, and maybe if you had one big, this team would be phenomenal, but I think the Pac-12 actually gets this done, not because they're nearly as talented as the SEC from a player versus player perspective, but because they have 2 guards, a wing, and 2 forwards, and those forwards being traditional forwards that will eat in the post. So give me the Pac-12.
So I'll come in here and break the tie. Again, I think y'all are actually both underselling the defensive impact of Johni Broome. He was very good this year for Auburn. He does lack some size in terms of like not length, but just being big, and that's obviously something Ballo excels at. But I do think he'll be able to put up a pretty decent fight. My interest is in the guards. I guess my question when figuring out which team was going to win is, okay, do I trust Caleb Love and KJ Simpson to have their best game, or do I trust Mark Sears and Wade Taylor to have their best game? You could argue that Wade Taylor and Caleb Love sort of cancel out because both of them have been very streaky throughout the year. But for me, I think Mark Sears is actually a pretty big X factor. I think he can take whoever guards him for 25, 30 points. And then when you have Dalton Connect as well, Tyson's a good defender, but Connect's going in the first round for a reason. And just because of those 2 factors and Antonio Reeves being able to shoot the ball, I like the SEC in this matchup.
All right, so the tie has been broken there. Finally, the ACC against the A10. I don't know. I don't think this one really is particularly close. The A10 kind of sets up as a really, well cohesive team, but so does the ACC here, and they're just a lot more talented. I mean, you got RJ Davis, you got Hunter Salas. That's a pretty damn good backcourt. You got Hinson on the wing. You got Filipowski, PJ Hall. That's just a really solid starting 5. I don't think they have they're not full of All-Americans like some of the other, conferences were, but you got RJ Davis, and that's more than enough, I think, to take down the ACC, to take down the A10 and Duron Holmes. And
yeah,
Ben,
I mean,
go ahead. Yeah,
I mean, it's clear. I mean, obviously, we talked about how the A10 could play together well. Duron Holmes could be an unstoppable force. I think I even said those words, and I said not many people in the country can guard him, but I feel like PJ Hall's experience and his strength could even shut Holmes down. You've got Kyle Filipowski there, like you mentioned. I mean, this team has a actual traditional 1 through 5 that some of these conferences don't have. And the talent is still there. Say what you want about the ACC. Blake Hinson's dropped 40 in a game. RJ Davis has gone all the way to the Final Four. It's been a couple of years, but he's had so much experience as a great college player. Filipowski, it just goes on, and I think the ACC is the clear pick here.
Yeah, not much to add there for me. We mentioned before that the Atlantic 10 might struggle a little bit when it came to a bigger squad, and this is a great example of that because Duron Holmes, I trust him with whoever his one-on-one matchup is defensively. But the problem is he can't guard both PJ Hall and Kyle Filipowski. Yeah. And that just creates some major issues, I think, especially if you have the ability to pass it out to Hinson or even Davis to shoot 3. You can't really double the post and dig down as well. I think this is just a talent situation, so I'm going to take the ACC as well.
So agreement across the board there. Moving on to the semifinals. We go to the other side of the bracket first. We got the Big Ten against the Big 12. Ben, do you want to go first here?
Yeah, this one was an interesting one to me just because there is a general question of whether Braden Smith and Boo Buie can bring the ball up the court, right? They are just, Lipsy and Shed are just fantastic defensively, and they can put a lot of ball pressure at the point of attack defensively. But if you look around at the other players, like I think the Big Ten pretty clearly wins the front court battle. Like Damask, whoever Dylan Dessou is guarding, whether it's Damask or Shannon, he's going to have a little bit of a speed disadvantage there. McCullough can lock up the other person, but I'm just interested to see what that matchup looks like. And then, of course, Edey, I do trust a little bit more than Dickinson in the paint. I think that he can get Dickinson in foul trouble, things like that. These are two heavyweight matchups again, even in the coaching level. Matt Painter and Kelvin Sampson, you can't really ask for much more there. In addition, I just think that the wings of the Big Ten are going to pull this one out for that conference, so I'm going to take them to the finals.
Yeah, Matt Painter also is very good at utilizing Zach Edey's talent. Like, you have to scheme a very specific way when you have a player of the uniqueness of Zach Edey. So good thing they have Matt Painter as the coach, someone who's experienced in doing that. Again, Purdue had good players surrounding Zach Edey, and they made it all the way to the national championship. I just don't like, you're multiplying that by 5 in terms of the talent around Zach Edey, and I just think they're unstoppable. Like, I don't see how you stop that team. So I'm going Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's already decided here, but I will just bring up the point, and I think that it'd be a toss-up for me. I really am tempted to go with the Big 12 just because of what Jamal Shed might be able to do. And I do look at the matchup. Donovan Clingan was only 3 for 8 in the game against Kansas that UConn lost in the regular season. Hunter Dickinson played him very, very tough. Obviously, Zach Edey, a whole different animal. But I just kind of look at that matchup and how Dickinson was able to play Clingan and say maybe he could defend Edey enough. And if these other guys are hitting shots, and if Jamal Shed is setting them up for open shots and really playmaking like he can, I feel like the Big 12 could get it done. But again, I already picked against the Big 10 with the Big East, so clearly I'm out to eliminate the Big 10. But yeah, it's already settled. Big 10's moving on, but I think it's food for thought.
All right, and then the other semifinal matchup, we got the ACC against the SEC. I'll take this one first because I picked against the SEC in the first round, and interestingly enough, I'm going to pick the SEC to win in the second round against the ACC. So the reason I had the SEC losing in the first round was because I felt like the traditional bigs of the Pac-12 could exploit their specific roster. But while Hall and Filipowski are more athletic, I don't think they specifically have that matchup advantage in the same respect. I think this one more will come down to the ACC guards against the SEC guards, and give me the SEC guards 9 times out of 10.
Interesting. I feel like the ACC has a little bit of an edge because I feel like PJ Hall could give Broome some trouble down low. But who is Kyle Filipowski going to guard in this matchup? Like, he's not going to be able to handle Wade Taylor or Mark Sears or Antonio Reeves. Do you really think he's even able to handle Dalton Connect? Like, I feel like if I'm the SEC in this hypothetical matchup, it's give the ball to whoever Kyle Filipowski is guarding and let them go to work, because these are, some of the most talented scorers in the country. That's a matchup nightmare. And just for that alone, I'm going with the SEC.
Yeah, y'all both brought up good points here. I think that this was actually closer than I thought it was going to be as I read the rosters for the first time, just because of it's like a weird matchup deal where you could argue, yes, who is Kyle Filipowski going to guard, but also who is going to guard Kyle Filipowski. I do think there's some merit to that, whether it's Connect or maybe Reeves that he posts up. He could get some pretty easy buckets just by being 3-4 inches taller there. But overall, I do like the SEC in this matchup. I just think, like I said, I'm one of the biggest Mark Sears fans you'll ever meet. So I think that he's the deciding factor in a lot of what I looked at in these conference races. And then Dalton Connect just has a different level to him that offensively that no one on the ACC can really match from a day-to-day basis. Like, everyone can get hot on the ACC, but not as consistently as Connect, especially in the last couple months of the season. So I'm going to take the Southeastern Conference to make it to the finals.
And then we got the finals. We got the Big Ten. I don't think that should say 2021 there. But we got the Big Ten against the SEC. I'll throw it to Matt, and then I'll throw it to Ben, and we'll see if I'm breaking a tie or not.
Yeah, we got the Big Ten as well. Probably should say their roster. Just clarification there.
Yeah.
But it's easy for me anyways, because I'm still going to ride with the SEC. I just think that the elite scoring that the SEC has is just way too tough to defend. I mean, the Big Ten, again, Zach Edey, Terrence Shannon, Boo Buie, so many great guys. Can Broome defend Edey? I don't know. He's physical enough. I think he is. But I just look at the scoring on this roster. I've said it so many times, and I'm just riding with it. I can't say much more. It just they can just score 100 points against practically any team they face.
Go ahead, Ben.
I think that this is probably the best matchup you're going to get out of the 8 conferences, or at least the 10 conferences that we had. I think that the SEC is finally going to run into its size issue in this game specifically, right? You don't have a ton of huge players. Don Connect is good, but he's 6'6". He's not going to be able to compete necessarily with big power forwards. And the Big Ten, just their wings are so strong that post-up games just become a way of life there. I don't know what it looks like with Zach Edey also being in the paint. Like, I wonder if they push him out to like the high post sometimes and let Damask or Shannon go to work. But I just think there are too many options, and the Big Ten's just too big inside for the SEC to be able to get the same amount of traction. So for that, I'm going with the Big Ten.
Yeah, Big Ten all around. So interesting to think about, where I don't think any of us think the Big Ten is the best conference, but they have the best chance of winning if you put the best 5 players of their conference against each other. I don't know really what that says. I don't think that really says anything besides this just being a fun hypothetical matchup. But I enjoyed doing this. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. We will have content throughout the offseason. Be sure to follow us on the socials, as you can see on the bottom of the screen. And take care.